Good afternoon. Welcome to the Ignite Hub. My name is Kimberly Blackrincan. I'm the director here at the Ignite Hub. Welcome to our guests that are joining us online. Welcome to our guests that are here in the hub. We made it. It's the end of the year. It's December. I hope that this year was great for you. It was wonderful for the Ignite Hub. So much support from the community and our guests and our participants and our students. So thank you for supporting us as well to support you. Today is our final Future of Tech Lunch and Learn session. We have an amazing speaker. I would like to acknowledge our sponsor for this guest speaker series, Verizon. They have supported us from the beginning with this guest speaker series. So afterwards, our guests who are here in person, enjoy your lunch. It's compliments of Verizon. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker today. I'm very honored to have somebody from Montgomery College to be here and speak for us. So David Vargas is a networking and cybersecurity professional at several local colleges and universities in the Washington, D.C. area. He has worked extensively in cybersecurity in both the public and private sectors and often shares his expertise at security conferences and professional meetings nationwide. Dave graduated magna cum laude from George Washington University and has completed graduate work in information systems at the Johns Hopkins University. He holds several cybersecurity certifications. Before moving to academia, David was president of, how do I pronounce it? Oh, okay, just say the letters, VATG Inc., a cybersecurity and networking integration company. So welcome, David. You're going to talk with us about the Darknet. I'd also like to acknowledge in our audience, we have Dr. Ala Webb, who is the department chair for science, engineering, and technology here at Montgomery College. Welcome. And I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Helio Sui, who is also the department chair in the Engineering, Physical, and Computer Sciences Department. Thank you for supporting this event and coming out. Thank you, thank you. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to our guest speaker, David.
All right, so my present today is titled Darknet. It ain't that scary or that dark. Next slide. So just a little bit different other than my intro. So yeah, so I've been actually teaching for over 27 years now. It's been a very long time. I actually teach Darknet courses at a digital forensics program, the master's program at George Mason University. So this is one of the areas where I'm a subject matter expert. And before here, I actually was in the industry for actually more than 25 years, but I like to keep it at that number so I feel younger. I have a really extensive cybersecurity background. I started in the military. That's where I got my cybersecurity training. I worked for the military in the intelligence community, and that's where my intro to that kind of stuff. And I was really fortunate because that actually led to my career. So I really thank them for that. Next slide. All right, so this is what we're going to be covering today. These are the agenda topics. And just want to warn you, the slide is, the presentation is very big, but everyone here is welcome to have a copy. You can contact me or Eduardo afterwards. And I'm only going to cover about each slide about a minute, but the slides will have more content that you can take with you and you can read. And if you have any questions after the webinar and seminar, you can actually email me, contact me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But we're going to start off with just introductory stuff, and then we're going to move on to something known as Tor onion routing, which is when you think of the word Darknet, you have to think of this thing called Tor. It's actually a network. They're actually kind of synonymous. We're going to talk about how you can get on the Tor network if you want to. I highly encourage people to do that. It's not really scary. It's very easy to do. And then we're going to give you some really famous examples of why the Darknet is famous today. Okay. And the examples, we're going to talk about a couple of Darknet markets, one of them known as Silk Road, and then the other one called Alpha Bay. And both of the folks who started those actually had tragic endings. Why? Because it's illegal to do some of the things they were doing. The United States puts you in jail for this stuff. And then we're going to let you know that, teach you, there are actually other darknets. The Tor network is not the only one. It is the most popular one because it's the easiest to use, but there are other darknets. Next slide. All right, so just a quick survey. Who knows what the darknet is? Sometimes they call it the dark web. Does anybody feel like they have an understanding of what the darknet is? Super, super. Who here has been on the darknet? Great. I know some of you have been on there. Okay, I want to ask what you were doing. Uh, who here is afraid of the dark net? Like, it's dark, right? It's scary. And who here would like to use the dark net more often? You're often. All right. Well, you're going to see, hopefully after this presentation, you're going to see it's actually not a scary place. Next slide. Yeah. So first thing is the web has layers. I don't know if you know about this, but the web actually has several different layers. We're going to talk about the first easiest layer. We call that the surface web. And then when we get a little deeper in using the web, we call it the deep web. And then what the focus of this presentation is going to be called the dark net or the dark web. Next slide. So what is the surface web? This is where you spend most of your time, right? You open up your web browser, whether it's Chrome or Firefox, and you go to Google and you do searches, you're spending your time on what we call the clear net or the surface web, okay? So it's the web that you're familiar with, okay? Next slide. Now, also, you may be familiar with the deep web, and this is just one, like I said, one level deeper. Has anybody ever logged into a website? Okay, guess what? You've been in the deep web. That's deep web. That's it. So in other words, there are sites that are not accessible to everyone. You need credentials to access them. So when you access your email, you access your brokerage account or your, anything medical, you're actually in the deep web. And I have to emphasize that because people use the terms badly and incorrectly. Okay, and it's funny because I actually was asked to review an article recently on the dark net, and it was clear to me the person knew nothing about the dark net. And I had to really, define this for them. And I was really concerned that somebody was writing an article and I had to make this clear for them. The deep web is not the scary place. The scary place is the next place. Next slide. And we call that the dark net, okay? I know everyone's heard about the dark net. Not everyone knows how to get there. It's famous because this is a place where cyber criminals hang out, okay? But the thing about the dark net, it's not just for cyber criminals, okay? It was actually designed, this whole technology was designed by the Navy, okay? It was actually designed to facilitate communications in the intelligence community, okay? And today, you're going to find that darknet is actually used by maybe dissidents in companies where there's oppression, countries where there's oppression, okay? So anyone who wants to hide, not necessarily doing something illegal, but wants to hide their activity, maybe it's protection from someone, they could be using the darknet. Now, one thing about the darknet is that because there's a lot of cyber criminal activity in there, it is being monitored. It is the target of the FBI and intelligence agencies, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you can't go and be on the darknet, okay? Because if you're not doing anything bad, it's not a big deal. What they're really monitoring are folks going to the scary places, that's what I call them, we call them .onion sites. And we're going to talk about darknet marketplaces, which these are the websites on the darknet where you're going to find things like child pornography, drug sales. In fact, today, we will visit a website where you can buy drugs as part of this presentation, okay? Now, you can visit these websites. I know that's kind of scary, okay? It's when you take your credit card out to buy some of the drugs, that's where the problem is, okay? Now, and so, but it's okay to visit these sites. It's just you can't engage in illegal activity. Probably the only one I'd be concerned about is if child pornography sites, there are child pornography sites on the darknet. That's considered a really heinous crime in the United States. And by the way, child pornography is really not illegal in every country. Okay, not every country has laws, but the United States is a very, very serious crime. Those are the sites I definitely would stay away from. Because they could be monitored, and if they are monitored, what law enforcement is doing is looking for visitors to those sites. And I don't know if I'll have a chance to explain how they do that, but definitely after the presentation, if you want to know how law enforcement does that, please let me know. So when you think of the darknet, it's synonymous with this network called the Tor network. Next slide. So what makes this happen is a technology known as Tor onion routing. Okay, and basically the principle of Tor onion routing is essentially that your data goes through 3 computers, and at each point your data is going to be encrypted. Okay, that's the onion, right? So next slide. So if you look at this picture here, and I just grabbed this off the internet, you'll see on the left-hand side you see a computer, and the destination is your darknet destination is a .onion site. So your traffic, and we're going to see this visually in the Tor browser a little later on, when you navigate to that destination, your data is going to be encrypted and decrypted at all those different locations there. Okay, that is the onion. So given what you know about IT and cyber, and you look at that architecture, what could you expect about the performance of that network if data is being encrypted and decrypted at each point? It's going to be slow. Exactly, it's going to be slow. And so you'll see even when I was doing some of the test websites with Ricardo before he got here, Eduardo, you could see it took a long time for some of these websites to download because of that. Next slide. So when you start a connection on the darknet, you actually create something known as what we call a relay. You establish a relay or a circuit where in the middle, left, right-hand side there, you're going to see all those servers there, and your traffic is going to go through a random set of those computers. And guess what? It changes all the time. Okay. And why would you want to change? Well, in case someone is monitoring you. Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, next slide. So notice that the first traffic that's sent with on the first, what we call this a circuit, you're going through those servers as indicated by the green arrows to get to, for Alice to get the Bob. And then you go to the next slide. But notice that the next time you go, after it changes a circuit, you could actually go to a different set of, totally different set of servers. And once again, this is in case you're being monitored. Now, if you're a bad guy, if you're being monitored by law enforcement or intelligence agencies, okay, or if you're trying to protect yourself against an oppressive government, it could be against the government. So really, it varies, depends on what your intentions are. And we'll show you a circuit in a couple of minutes. So let's go through go ahead, next slide. There are three components for you to get on the darknet. The first thing you're going to need is a client, a Tor client. Now, there are several ways to access the darknet, and I don't have time to talk about them here, but the most common is using a web browser called the Tor browser. Then there are these Tor relays. These are these servers that people build, they put out on the internet that actually are designed to accept and then relay Tor type traffic. And then we have hidden services, and those hidden services, I say, these are the scary places that people are afraid to visit. Okay, this is the folks where you're going to find your cyber criminal activity, your CSAM, et cetera. Next slide. So the first example is a Tor browser. Okay, one thing people don't understand about the Tor browser, it's actually based on Firefox. Does anybody here use Firefox as their primary browser? Yeah, this is Firefox. It's based on what we call an extended service release version of Firefox. So it's not a normal Firefox. It's a version of Firefox ESR focuses more on security than features. Okay, so it is a version of Firefox. It is managed and created by an organization. It's a nonprofit called the Tor Project. Okay, and it is pre-configured for Tor access. So what does that mean? So you could actually, as soon as you launch a Tor, Tor browser, it's going to ask you to create a circuit over the network, the onion network. Okay, and then it's got other features that are related to browsing on the Tor network. It's multi-platform. You can even find it a version for Android operating system if you want to, and you can run it off a flash drive. Okay, so I'll have a picture there. Is anybody familiar with the concept of a portable application? Yeah, a portable app basically is it's something that you install on a flash drive and can be run from a flash drive. So you can go and use a Tor browser from any computer if you have it on your flash drive. And I'll show you how to do that. And what people don't understand is that this browser can also be used to access Surface websites like Chrome, like Google, any place that you normally visit. But there are some couple of disadvantages of that. Let me give you one example. When I was in industry, I had a customer, and he was a millionaire, and he only wanted me to support him. Okay, he came in one day. He said, "Dave, I want to have this VPN client," and it was a VPN client called Tunnel Bear. Okay, which is a really cute VPN client. When you go through the traffic, it shows like little honeypots that it goes through. Really cute. And I'm like, Brian, you don't need this. Let me just put you on the Tor browser. Don't waste your money. So I installed the Tor browser, right? On him. I'm trying to save him money. And he calls me the next day and he says, Dave, why are all the websites I'm going to in a different language? And I didn't think about that, because when you come out of a circuit in Tor, you could be coming out of different countries. So he was here in Tysons, Virginia, okay? But sometimes he was coming out from France. So he was visiting Financial Times website and he was seeing it in French, because the site was thinking he was coming from France. Okay, so yeah, so we're going to demonstrate that. So maybe it's not a total replacement for your current browser, but sometimes it is. And when you launch it, like I said, it has features built in that for Tor access, it'll establish that Tor circuit. Next slide. And so this is what it looks like, right? It looks like a normal web browser. Okay, next slide. You got to be careful because Tor, because of who it's used by, and I don't know if you know this, but hackers hack each other. Do you guys know that? Yeah, I mean, there's no like solidarity between them. They're criminals, right? So yeah, sometimes you'll see Trojanized versions of these applications out there. This is an example for the Tor browser. So some people are downloading Tor browser, but that they got a little surprise. It actually wasn't the Tor browser, it was malware. Next slide. And once again, as I said before, you can actually use the Tor browser to surf the regular internet. Now, if you wouldn't mind, Eduardo, can we switch to the Tor browser just to demonstrate this slide here? And we're going to start off with the new, actually, if you could just relaunch it so we could establish a circuit with the Tor browser. And we'll show you how that works. It's really easy. Okay, so, okay. Oh, establish this session already. All right, so establish a session for us. Do you mind going to, and by the way, how do we know we're really not on the Darknet yet? Okay, we've opened the Tor browser. We established a circuit, okay, which we'll show you a circuit in a couple minutes. But now we're going to go to a site on the Surface web. Let's go to the New York Times. Now, if the website has a corresponding site on the Darknet, you're going to see a special icon on the Tor browser. And so you commonly will see these with news sites, right? Once again, it's some oppressive governments. They will try to, they're going to try to limit what their citizens see, right? Because they want to control the flow of information. So when we go to the New York Times website, you're going to see on the top right, like Eduardo is pointing out here, you see Onion available. But before we click on that, I want you to notice the URL for the New York Times is https www.newyorktimes.com, right? That means we're on the ClearNet, but this is the regular internet. So let's go to the Darknet, click on Onion available. And one of the things that you're going to see is that the URL or the address is going to change to this really long address. Yeah, which we call that, and I see at the end, it ends in .onion. That's why we call these sites .onion sites, okay? Every hidden, we call a hidden site on the Darknet is going to end in .onion. And so we're on the Darknet, right? See, it's not that scary. Who do you run there? Do you feel better now we're on here, right? It's not that scary. So we're actually on the Darknet right now. Now let's show you, and by the way, this will be the exact duplicate of what they have on the ClearNet typically. Yeah, if you have a question, feel free to ask me. Oh, yes, you had a question?
The NewYorkTimes.com, their access is not available in their country, say so. And then they will click on .onion, and then now they can get.
If they're in that country, they're not going to get New York Times at all, right? They're not going to block. So they'll have to have access to this address. See that? And you basically bookmark these addresses and get them. There are ways to get them, but that's correct. Yeah.
I'm kind of familiar with the browser, but doesn't the .onion link change each time, or is it?
Well, the URL changes, not the .onion.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you look to the left of .onion, that is the site's address, and that will change depending on the website because they're all different.
Yeah,
That is generated when you create your relay. And I actually have a slide. If you want to create a Tor relay, you can go to the Tor project website and they'll have instructions on how to do that. So if you could click that little squiggly line on the left-hand side. Now this is you're going to click on that. This is the circuit that was established, okay, to get to the New York Times Darknet site. So notice that we came from here. We went to a guard node, which is a relay that gets you onto the Darknet in Canada, okay? Then from there, it went to another server in the United Kingdom, and then it came out the United States again. Now, if you want to, you can actually refresh this, like click on that new Tor circuit for this site, And notice how it's changed. See that? Now any traffic will go from Germany to the United States to the United States. Can we click that one more time, Eduardo, if you don't mind? Okay, now we're going from, we're going from Canada to Germany. So this automatically will change it. The default used to be every 7 minutes. I think they changed that recently. But if you feel like you want to change it yourself, you can actually go and change the circuit yourself. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So that's an example of these relays, and we're going to talk more about that. Can we return to the presentation? Thank you, Eduardo. Doing a great job there with the URLs. You said it. So this is what I was trying to demonstrate here just now. That notice we went to the New York Times. It was a regular website, but when you click on .onion, once again, if the site has an equivalent on the Darknet, you can be taken to it, and you can tell by those little crazy addresses that you see there. Okay, next slide. And once again, if you want to install the Tor browser onto a flash drive, that's what I did here. Essentially, all I did was download the installation routine, and when I went through the installation routine, I pointed it to the flash drive, which is the D drive at the moment. It'll create that Tor browser folder. So if you want to run, now, once it's installed, you take that flash drive, you put it on a computer, and you just launch the executable, and guess what? You're on the Tor network. Okay. Yep. Okay. Next slide. So one thing about Tor is that it's decentralized, right? We have the second component is these Tor relays that we just saw, and essentially they're those devices that get you from the source to the destination. And once again, when you first launch your Tor browser, you're going to establish your initial circuit. Okay, and that means that the browser will pick at random 3 servers to route your traffic through, totally at random among hundreds of servers. Okay, and by the way, these servers are run by volunteers throughout the world. I actually read a story where one Tor relay was actually run by a library. They believed in freedom of speech, so they created a relay. Next slide. And so, and as I showed before, just to emphasize, so these are the relays, and I'm giving you 2 examples. In that left-hand picture, I went to a .onion site, which was Grams, which is a drug search engine. And when I went there were actually search engines on the internet that's special, because really, when you look at the activity, and we're going to talk about this more, that's happening on the Darknet, it's really drug focused. I mean, 90% drug focused, if I have to give it a number. But you could see there's a relay there. But then when I went to GW, the website, I also had a different relay there in the little red box. Next slide. Okay. So the 3 different nodes. If you took my graduate course at Mason, you're free to do that. I would go over in detail about these things, but we won't. But I will say that the dangerous one is the exit node. This is the one. Go back one more. The exit nodes are dangerous because sometimes, if law enforcement is monitoring traffic that's going to a site that could be dangerous, they're monitoring the exit node. So there was a case of a teenager in Germany who operated an exit node, and law enforcement saw traffic coming from his exit node to a child porn site. Okay, so what did it look like? It looked like he was visiting a child porn site, right? Because it's his server, but it was that he operated an exit node. And so guess what? He was arrested. He went to trial. Everything was explained, but he still was fined several $1,000s. He was put on probation, and the lawyer's fees must have been met. So you got to be careful with that one there. But yeah, so those are the nodes. You can actually select what kind of node that you're going to run when you actually install Tor. Next slide. Yes, sir.
So if he was charged from my understanding, was innocent.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's just someone else was going to that child porn site. But when law enforcement, you see, the original source is obfuscated from law enforcement. They're only seeing that when they compromise that website, because typically that's what they'll do. They'll compromise the .onion site. They'll monitor visits to it. And one of the easiest ways to say, well, what IP addresses are visiting me, right? So when they grab that information, it was IP addressing information that belonged to that teenager.
Okay.
And so they're going to go, there's a process. How does law enforcement find you? Well, typically they're going to go by IP address. The process is they see an IP address going to a malicious site. They basically they have probable cause to get a search warrant or a search subpoena, but typically they'll do a subpoena they'll look at the IP address and say, oh, this is an IP address that belongs to Verizon. They'll get a subpoena for Verizon, say, give me the name of the owner of this IP address. Who have you leased this to, right? And then they get a search warrant. Now that they have that information, they have probable cause to get a search warrant from a judge, and then they knock on your door. So that's typically the process that happens.
Say that an exit relay kind of works like a botnet because it has just a different, like a system of computers, or is it completely different?
It's different. Yeah, it's different because botnet is intentionally malicious. I don't want you to leave away thinking that the Tor network is a bad place, because a lot of people that use it for good. And, but the reputation that it has is that it's a bad place. Now, this kid, he didn't think about the implications of setting up an exit relay. If I was going to advise someone, I would probably advise you, set up a Tor relay, just not an exit relay. I mean, because those are the ones that are dangerous. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, he was hacked by someone.
No. Set it up intentionally. See, like here.
No. To pornography, was he actually?
No. Okay, so when I launched my Tor browser, I have the address for a CSAM site. We call it child sexual abuse material. So how do you get those addresses? Well, the CSAM community, I mean, this is not, you can't just search Google for this, right? These addresses are held pretty closely, and people in this community, they're tight, they share it with each other. So let's pretend I'm visiting a CSAM site. I have this address. I put it in my Tor browser, okay? Tor will automatically route me to that address. It's going to go through 3 random servers, the relay. And so when law enforcement was paying attention, it just so happened that CSAM was coming from that kid's exit relay. See what I'm saying? Yeah. Make sense? Yeah. So here, I mean, if you want to establish an exit relay, the Tor project right there, they'll actually give you instructions for doing that. And I actually, when I taught at Mason this semester, actually, I had a student that was working in cyber, and he actually was doing work with Tor relays. That was part of his job in cyber. He couldn't say what he was doing because it's a digital forensics program. A lot of times they have contracts with law enforcement intelligence community, but he indicated that he was actually operating a relay as part of his work. Yeah, thank you, Eduardo. Next slide. Yeah, thank you for asking the question. And so, and then there's the hidden services. These are the .onion sites. And I have an example here for Facebook. Okay, they're not all bad sites, but here's an example of Facebook. They actually have a website on a .onion site. Once again, some countries would like to spy on what you're saying in space on Facebook. That's why Facebook has an onion site, to protect against that. Okay, once again, their goal is to prevent governments from eavesdropping on you, surveilling you. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about why the darknet is infamous. Next slide. All right, so what is a darknet? These are the .onion sites where bad actors go to buy things that are usually illegal. Drugs is number 1. You can buy weapons. Although if you want to get weapons legally, you just go to Virginia, right? You don't have to go to a, right? Forced prostitution, human trafficking. Human trafficking is a serious problem today, especially in Asia. It's a big deal. And a lot more that I didn't have a space in the slide to elaborate on. Next slide. So the first example I wanted to talk about is this famous example is a famous website called Silk Road. And Silk Road was famous because it's the first one, okay? And it was started in 2011, and then it became famous when there was a Forbes article written about it. Okay, that's how it became common knowledge of what they were doing. And by the way, in the presentation, I want to make sure I didn't forget certain things. So I put them in red. So look, it did not allow the sale of anything whose main purpose was to harm innocent people or that required harming innocent people to bring to market. So in other words, they didn't want to have any hitmen advertising services. They didn't want anybody advertising extortion services. No CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. No counterfeit coupons. I always thought that was kind of interesting. And no firearm sales. But everything else was fair game. And you know what everything else was? Usually drugs. Next slide. Yeah. So researchers at Carnegie Mellon, it's really hard to figure out how much he made, but they figured that he made about $15 million in narcotic sales only annually. $15 million, okay? And he was able to do what he did because he had a site on the Tor network, okay? It was a big challenge for investigators to find this guy. So what did Tor do for him? Well, it provided anonymity. Okay, that's one of the reasons people use Tor is they want their web browsing to be anonymous. Why? Because if you're visiting a site today from your computer, law enforcement can go, find your network. They find where you're coming from in normal internet, right? But if you're using Tor browser, you're coming from Germany. You're coming from France. See what I'm saying? You're coming from the Netherlands. It's a lot harder to track you down. They had a Tor protected messaging system. So even their messaging was encrypted. Next slide. So it was not Tor, but a new cryptocurrency called Bitcoin that was the key that unlocked the anonymous financial potential of the Darknet. Tell you right now, if we did not have Silk Road, we would not have Bitcoin today and cryptocurrencies. It was Silk Road that made Bitcoin famous, okay? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, because one of the places where you find most of the scams today is cryptocurrency. I'm going to advise you, do not buy cryptocurrency. Just don't do it. And I've met people who bought it, and I mean, the only people who are really making money are the folks who bought cryptocurrency early on. Now it's just full of scams and bad actors. Don't do it. But yeah, if it wasn't for Bitcoin, this all wouldn't really be possible. Next slide. So, and why was it famous? Well, guess what? You could get on Silk Road things that you couldn't get at other sites. Look at this. You could get cocaine, not only hallucinogens, but rare hallucinogens, heroin, unique marijuana strains, because the common strains are not good enough, MDMA, methamphetamines, pirated software, and fake IDs. And next slide, I just want to show this, the fake IDs. This is the guy who ran Silk Road. And when he was arrested, these were his fake IDs, okay? So he had them for like almost every state, fake IDs. Next, yeah. And by the way, one of the reasons that, and maybe not this, but today, one of the reasons that law enforcement really goes after these sites is because of sales of fentanyl, which is, and we're going to talk about another darknet market, Alpha Bay, where fentanyl was a big deal, and that really is what drives law enforcement. It's just a horrible, horrible drug. We're having kids in middle school who are, being, having what, fentanyl overdoses in Virginia, I've read about. So that's the big driver. Next slide. So also, it was very innovative. Okay, they had ratings and review systems. So if you didn't like the cocaine I sold you or anything I did, you could still have me, and it would affect my sales. Okay, just kind of like the rating systems that you have on other things, right? Professional moderators. Okay, so they actually had staff that were keeping track of the different forums to make sure that everyone's happy. Arbitrating disputes, etc. Escrow payments for a system for payments. Well, guess what? I just spent $2,000 on my cocaine. Well, guess what? I want to make sure I get my cocaine before it's released, right? So you know what it would do? It would have an escrow. And once I confirm I got my cocaine and I was happy with it, then it would release the money. This is clever, right? But you don't realize that this is a business. I mean, and it really ran like a real business. Hedging features. One of the problems with using cryptocurrency to buy drugs and other things is crazy price fluctuations. So guess what? They would actually protect you against price fluctuations. So whatever whatever Bitcoin price that you bought something at that day, it's stuck that way. So if the price went down, okay, they would actually pay the difference. Next slide. But there's more. And how did it make its money? It charged a commission, okay, on a sliding scale. So if it was a small order, they'd get 10%. On larger orders, they get 15% of the sale. Okay, that's how they made their money. They also had a tumbler system. And I don't know if you've ever heard these things called tumblers, but these are services that are actually, they're involved, like if you think of money laundering, you basically give them your cryptocurrency that was obtained illegally and they launder it. Okay, we call them tumblers. They actually had a built-in tumbler service. Okay, yeah, yes, sir.
And the purpose is to throw off investigators from seeing what came off on the blockchain. And that's what I found very interesting.
That's the purpose. But you know what, they get, and it's not, one was in the news recently called Sinbad, that was just taken down by the US government. Yeah, there are several of them. Tornado Cash was one. They're actually, they get sanctioned by the Treasury Department. They're targets of FBI because they're cryptocurrency money laundering services. Next slide. So this was actually Silk Road's management console. It's hard to get pictures of this stuff, but look, it looks like just a regular web interface, right? But this was actually a picture of their management console. I'm not sure where this came from. I couldn't attribute it, but this could have been, this is probably had to be from law enforcement. Okay, maybe this was the day that they arrested this guy named Ross Ulbricht. I'm not sure, but that's, looks like just regular interface. Next slide. So when it comes to investigating, it's hard to investigate stuff on the darknet. And there were two famous investigations. One of them was Baltimore based and another one was based in New York. Because I don't know if you know about this, but law enforcement, they don't work cohesively. Okay, but it's kind of like, but this is the thinking. It's like kind of like the military where, commanders on the ground, they have lots of flexibility on how they do their stuff because they're the ones the most aware of their situation, their surroundings. You're not going to have a general telling a captain or a major how they should do their job, right? Because the general is somewhere in an air-conditioned room, right? And it's the captain or the major on the ground. Well, it's the same thing with law enforcement. So we had these two simultaneous investigations with different approaches. And I have this guy named Karl Mark Force IV in red there, because he was leading the investigation in Baltimore. At the same time he was leading it, he was extorting Dread Pirate Roberts and actually ended up going to jail. Okay, because he thought it was all anonymous. He thought he knew how it worked, but guess what? We have some pretty smart people in law enforcement. So he wound up going to jail. Next slide. So the New York based investigation. This is this guy named, and by the way, it's the IRS. I don't know if you realized it, but IRS is the one that took these guys down. Right, because they're not paying their taxes, right? But this agent called Gary Alford, he actually did some. And by the way, how do you find these sites? A lot of times, these agents, they're just surfing, they're looking for stuff, And so what he did was he went to this. If you look at that in January 11th, he went to this site called Shroomery, and where he first saw that Silk Road was being advertised, he, as a source for drugs. What we had is someone was trying to generate business for Silk Road. And then let's notice at around the same time, a user with the same handle had asked for programming help on a coding forum and listed his email address as rossulbricht@gmail.com. What we call this is poor operational security, or OPSEC. Okay. So yeah, that's how this guy was found. Ross, Ross made a mistake, but he actually went back and that's how we discovered him. Next slide. So that's him. Okay. By the way, I'm going to have a picture of him later on in a totally different environment, but that's him. I'll tell you, Ross Ulbricht was a smart guy. If I recall, he had he was studying physics, PhD in physics. And on like for free, like part of like some, I don't know if it was a Fulbright, but something. Okay, he was a smart guy. He wasn't, the common cyber criminal. He just had beliefs that he believed that people should do drugs. It's our business, what we do with our bodies. That was his thinking. Okay. So this is Gary Alford. He said, look, though Ulbricht later deleted his email address from the post, it had been copied into someone's response to the message, preserving it on the web. Lesson. What you put on the internet stays there. And I tell my kids that, and they don't get it. They just don't get it. Next slide. So he was indicted, Ross Ulbricht was indicted. This was his 4-count indictment in 2014. Next slide. Oh, yeah, you don't have to go to the link. This is the slide. And so what happened? He was convicted. Okay, there he is in jail. Okay, but I want you to know what his sentence was. Yeah, he got 40 years. He got 2 life sentences plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. He's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. Yes, sir.
What was he indicted for?
Go back. There was a 4-count indictment for narcotic trafficking conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise, computer hacking conspiracy, and money laundering.
So he posted online that he did it or something?
Anytime anyone is indicted, you get an actual indictment.
I heard you say that don't never post something online.
No. When he posted his email.
Oh.
Deleted it, but it was already being.
So that's how they track them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is the government's indictment. You know, once they found him, they have to do the case,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
And so this is what he worked to court and he was charged with. Yes, sir.
Missed it, I ain't have.
Why do you think Ross got penalized very harshly for such a like non-violent crime instead of
But you-
actually like penalizing the
Drugs
ones
kill
who stole?
people. I don't realize that's, yeah, and yeah, I mean, you gotta remember that people die from this stuff. You know, there are consequences you don't realize when someone overdoses. Well, yeah, sure. Someone wants to take drugs, okay, they overdose and they only hurt themselves. No, they don't. There's family, you know, there's a society, there's cost to what he did. That's the reason this stuff is illegal. Yeah, so.
That's true.
Drugs is not, it's serious. Drugs are serious. I mean, it's not like jaywalking. You get arrested for any, you know, I mean, drug use is one thing, but when you're selling drugs, you know, there's a different category of drug user and someone selling drugs.
Indicted for selling drugs as well, or?
Well, yeah, go back to the indictment. So you'll see,
Okay.
narcotics trafficking.
Okay, I missed that part.
Yeah,
Another
yeah.
question I was gonna say was he just created the website, so that's why I was.
No. He created the website and he ran the website. He ran it. He coordinated the sale of all this stuff. That was his website. He had people working for him, but don't be fooled. This was his website. Yeah. Other people went to jail too. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I mean, this was just considered so serious. I mean, look at, who's it? El Chapo. This guy's no different from El Chapo. What's El Chapo's sentence? Life. Yeah, this is serious stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Of law, you have to have evidence of somebody killing, but in this case, it's like a business. So is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, if I arrest, okay, you're selling drugs to someone, to an undercover police officer. He's not gonna be using the drugs, but you're gonna be arrested and you're gonna be charged as if you were selling it to someone else. The fact that you're selling the drug, that's illegal. You know, we're not talking marijuana and some of this stuff. We're talking serious illegal substances that do harm. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna put an input to what he was saying. It's almost like when people drink liquor, everybody doesn't move the same.
Everybody doesn't operate the same. And I was just saying that from what you said, like even when you're around family, some people could take that one drink and not have an argument. Some people could have a drink and go to sleep. Some people don't operate all the same. So when they have certain chemicals or certain things in your body, especially somebody just telling you just, hey, you take it or whatever, the mindset's different.
Pusher.
Right.
Really think about it. He's a pusher because he's selling drugs to money. And he makes more money the more people buy his drugs. So they're doing the marijuana. The marijuana becomes illegal.
Right.
And he's also selling heroin. You know, that's a whole nother category of drug. You know, what if you have some 13-year-old kid? Oh, doesn't really know about it and takes heroin and they're addicted for life. I mean, there are costs to our society for people, you know, with rehabilitation and medical. I mean, and family costs that are serious for some of these serious drugs. It's not, like I said, it's not marijuana. Yeah, thank you. So, by the way, No, life sentence. Yeah, like he's never getting out of jail, and I'm okay with that, honestly, because he was never really remorseful. In fact, when he was arrested, he still he would never admit guilt. He was claiming that someone set him up, that it wasn't him. He wouldn't even admit guilt, you know. So if you admit guilt, I'll tell you right now, judges will view you differently. If you show remorse, you accept responsibility. He never did that. And so when you don't do that, judges tend to be really intolerant. And they're going to throw the book at you to set an example. And there's a bit of an example of this too, because he was the first. Got to set an example. But I'll tell you right now, it wasn't a good example. Because when he was put in jail, there was a Silk Road 2 that was up and running, doing the same thing within a month. Why? The money. The money is crazy money. Now, that person who did Silk Road 2 also was arrested. He was found. He was a guy, actually someone in the cybersecurity community that was well known. And then there was a Silk Road 3. But be careful with Silk Road 3. Some of us think it's run by law enforcement because sometimes law enforcement put up .onion sites to basically to see who visits them. Yeah. So you got to be careful today on these sites. Yeah. Oh, so if you, I'm sorry, this other slide, if you want to know where Ross Ulbricht is, I didn't know this service existed, but you can put anybody's name and find out where what prison they're currently located at. Because I was having trouble locating him. I wanted to know where he was. Okay, thank you. So after Silk Road, we had another example. It's called Alpha Bay. And notice that at its height, it was 3 to 4 times the size of Silk Road. A huge amount of money, talking tens of millions of dollars. Okay. And it was started by someone who was first, what would they call a carder? He would sell like, like numbers for credit cards. Next slide. His name was Alpha 2. This is actually a couple of snapshots of what the Alpha Bay website looked like. Okay, listing services. These are very professional looking websites. Okay. Next slide. And in the original days, it was just focusing on some very low level crime. But notice over time it evolved and united the distinct areas of cybercrime and drugs. Once again, here's the drugs piece. Okay. But what's really interesting about these guys here is that this guy tried to fool folks. Okay. Notice it says aside from a ban on CSAM, which is, and by the way, some website owners or Darknet, they don't want to deal with CSAM because that's good. You're going to have, law enforcement officers who have kids. They get highly motivated going after CSAM sites. I'm just telling you right now. They're going to like go all out to find out who you are and put you in jail. And murder for hire, the only restrictions imposed on vendors were 1, not sell or sell data or accounts stolen from Russia or other former Soviet states. So what's the first thing you're going to think of when you see that? I think of a la web when I see that. What do you think? But what are you going to assume with that when you see that? He's Russian. Totally not the case. It's designed to throw off investigators. We're going to see that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And not infect those countries' computers with malware. Next slide. So notice that restrictions suggested to investigators that Alpha Bay and Alpha O2 were based in Russia. Once again, and also his signature was in Russian, where he and when you translate it, he said it meant "be safe, brothers" in Russian. So he actually was trying to fool folks. Good. So he also was operated a .onion site. Okay, but how was he caught? Notice that due to a server misconfiguration, there was a message that was sent and the metadata revealed, right? You learn about metadata, that the email address of the person who sent the message was someone called Pimp Alex 91. Interesting. But you got to look at that name because now looking back, there's a reason he picked that name. We're going to explain that at Hotmail. And notice along with the IP address of the server in Netherlands. Okay, so now we go from Russia to Netherlands. The mistake was quickly fixed, but an informant kept a copy of the welcome email and eventually shared it with DE agent Roger Miller. Okay, once again, anything put on the internet stays there. So he was actually outed by someone else who was turning him in. Who was turned in. Someone sent this, he said, I know who this guy is. This is an email, he kept this email after years and he sent it to law enforcement. Next slide. So what do investigators do? They use Google like everybody else. And basically they did a search for Pimp Alex 91 at Hotmail and appeared on French language social media sites. They found someone named Alex. They found a dating profile that for a man identified his hometown in Quebec. And his age at the time indicated that the 91 in his email address was his birth year. So little by little, we're going to find out this guy. Okay, next slide. So who did they find out? That it was this guy. Okay. And by the way, these guys, a lot of times they'll have LinkedIn pages. Ross Ulbricht, I didn't show that because I had to shorten the presentation, but he had actually a LinkedIn page, which I have in my original presentation. But it was this guy here. He advertised himself as a software designer. Next page. Okay. And so they found he was a software designer. In that profile, it listed that he was in Canada, but really he wasn't in Canada. Okay. And the allusions to Russia and his Russian language snippets were a ruse, like I said before. Next slide. So just as with DPR, that's Ross Ulbricht. We called him Dread Pirate Roberts. his OPSEC security mistakes had been permanently saved in the Internet Archive. Okay. Okay, so when investigating him, law enforcement had to be careful because there's this concept of an exit scam. In Alpha Bay, he has in their little coffers millions and millions of dollars. And what happens in an exit scam, if he knows he's being investigated, what is he going to do? Shut everything down and take the money. And they would never, might not ever find him again. So they had to be careful about him. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about him as a man. He was a womanizer. Okay, he was very sexually active. Okay, and how did they explain that? Well, he was a member of this forum, which is no longer up, called Roosh V Forum, that basically taught men how to pick up girls, women, have sex with them, all these strategies. It was like the forum where you did all that stuff there. Okay, notice that if you look at the little bullet, it says Keza secretly recorded every new sexual encounter with a hidden camera. In Thailand, he was rich enough to have several apartments and houses. In one of them, he had hidden cameras. And so there was one story where he met like a woman I guess it was like outside of a 7-Eleven in one instance, the other one in a class he was taking. And they just went back to this room and he had sex with them. And he recorded it. Okay. So that's what kind of person he was. Okay. Next slide. Why was he like this? Well, because he didn't have a good relationship with his father. He felt like he wasn't masculine enough. And so he felt like he needed to have all these sexual experiences to prove his masculinity. Notice that he was fired from every job he ever had. But look at the reason. Okay, he was fired from one position for having an affair with the shareholder's wife. Is that crazy? Okay, next slide. He was very wealthy. Okay. This is some of his vehicles, right? He drove a Lamborghini that was worth over $1 million. Okay. But look at this. He had so much cash that he had piles of bills hidden in the walls of his primary home. I don't know about you, but I wish I had that problem. That's how much money he had. Next slide. And notice he spent a lot of money at restaurants. He spent $40,000 in one meal on one evening. Okay. And he had several homes. Those are some of the pictures of his homes. Okay. Beautiful homes in Thailand. One of them valued at $6 million. Next slide. And the arrest. You know what? His arrest is actually on the internet. You could look it up. It's a very short video, but what they had to do is because his laptop where he managed the Darknet site was the laptop had what's called full disk encryption. And all he had to do was close the lid and law enforcement would never be able to access it. It would be very, 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 very difficult. So they had to come up with a ruse. How can we had to come up with this ruse? Well, we felt he was at his laptop managing the site where he wouldn't run, he'd rush out of his house because he did all this out of his bedroom and not close the lid. So they came up with the ruse of slamming a car into his front gate. So that, and they actually slammed a car into his front gate. And what they did was, as he came rushing out to make sure everything was okay, he was arrested. And so, right, another officer went quickly to his bedroom to make sure that they could access the computer, because you have to have, you can't associate him as the manager of this site or running the site if you can't access that data. So they got the management console and they got everything they needed to arrest him. So it worked. Next, you got to be quick. Next slide. By the way, there was something also dramatic in the Arrest for Dread Pirate Roberts. They did something similar. He was in a library and, where he was managing his site, and FBI, he did not realize that there were FBI agents all around him that were dressed as homeless people. And so this was the ruse, that he was sitting like this and FBI agent across from him, and behind him, two FBI agents acted like they were fighting. And so what did Ross Albert do? He turned around. The FBI agent quickly grabbed the laptop and he was immediately arrested because they needed to get the laptop open, because if he shut the lid, it would, full disk encryption would be enabled and they'd never be able to access the data. So he was arrested in a library. So after he was arrested, he was not taken to a Thai prison, but they wanted to convince him to cooperate. So they took him to a police station. And why did they want him to cooperate? Because they wanted him to agree to extradition to the US and avoid a long legal process. So they actually were treating him really nice, bringing him French food because he was French Canadian. So he was treated really nice. And they also wanted to get him to agree to be an informant, okay, which he was reluctant to do. Next slide. What happened? He killed himself. Okay, he never faced justice. There's this picture actually up in the top right there. He actually choked himself with a towel, which there's nothing to hang from. Apparently, I read some reports that this is possible. There's some medical experts that explain how he could have done this, but basically he wrapped a towel around his neck and he killed himself. So he never faced justice. So he actually died of self-asphyxiation in a Thai police station. Next slide. So how did this impact darknet markets? Guys, there's plenty of darknet markets out there. We're constantly taking them down. Okay, law enforcement has to find them. They're still selling drugs. Okay, there's still CSAM sites out there. It's just not going to go away. And why is that? Because the money is just too good. What you've got to do, I mean, it takes a long time for law enforcement to hunt these websites down, definitely, but they're not going anywhere. Next slide. So I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to finish with other darknets. Just know that the Tor network is not the only darknet out there. There are others. I actually teach 3 of those, the first 3 at Mason, I2P, LokiNet, and ZeroNet. Next slide. Nobody uses them because they're very difficult. They don't always work. And so really, if anybody who's using a darknet today, they're going to use the Tor browser because it doesn't, it's an easy browser. You download it. Some of these require very complex clients. There's a very high learning curve. They're not always reliable. Okay, but you can go out actually and download those if you want to. Next slide. Any questions? I know it's an hour. Thank you. Thank you. Any additional questions? Because I'm going to stay here. So if you have any additional questions, I can definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, and a special thanks to Ignite Hub, not just for allowing me to come and speak, but they're doing some amazing things for the community. So I'll let you know, we're all pretty grateful at MC for your doing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Wow, that was amazing. I still have lots of questions, but thank you for explaining it in a way to help us understand. Wow, those concrete examples, screen grabs, all of that bring it to life. So I appreciate that you've done that for us. If we have questions, we can take maybe a few. We did do it throughout, so that was helpful. And then anybody in the chat, I'm going to look here on the iPad. Are there any questions in there? No questions. Okay. Oh, yes.
Of circuits, so like relay circuits to be used for like investigative purposes,
Yeah.
like a subpoena. No.
No, that's part of the achieving the anonymity piece.
Yeah.
Thank you. On our screens, in person and also online, we have an event survey. If you could please fill that out and let us know, what did you think about this session today? We want to be able to provide content and information for you that's meaningful, relevant, and any upgrades or ideas that you have. The Hub team does sit down, we look at the data, and we do make programming decisions based on feedback from people who've attended our events. So we really do value that. I have a couple of other announcements, right? First, for David, we have a thank you for coming to the Hub and for presenting for us. So that is for you. We also have our little raffle. Oh, I'm not supposed to say raffle. Giveaway. We have a giveaway. So if at each table, there is a chair that has a badge that says congratulations. If that's you, we have some Hub swag to give away to you.